Years ago, another priest pointed out to me that you can walk through downtown Denver wearing anything. You could look crazy, you could look weird, and no one's going to notice or care. But if you walk through downtown Denver wearing a Roman collar, you stand out and people are going to stare. And it's pretty accurate, I think, at least in my experience so far of being a priest. It's funny how many times people stare or are drawn to me or repelled by me simply by the fact that I'm wearing a Roman collar. Recently, I was in a restaurant having lunch by myself, reading a book, when a woman walked up to me and she just said, "I just want to thank you for your ministry." It was very thoughtful of her. And just a couple minutes later, I became very aware that the table next to me was a conversation between two men, and they noted that a priest was sitting near them, and it led them into a conversation around what it is about the Catholic Church that they hate. So even though these people didn't know me, simply by the fact that I was wearing this, it sparked gratitude in one person and irritation and anger in another person. It's interesting how people have such different reactions to the Roman collar. So in this video, I just want to say a few words about the history of the Roman collar. Why do priests wear this? And what is something that maybe we can all grasp, we can all take away from the fact that priests wear this in public? In the very early church, there was very little, if any, conversation around what a priest should wear. It just really wasn't a concern. Remember, in those early centuries of the church, there was a lot of persecution of Christians. Christians were being persecuted in different ways. They were being killed in different ways. And so it just wasn't an urgent conversation piece. It wasn't that important. But I also think, in part, if priests wore distinctive clothing, well, that would make them a very obvious target. It might actually limit their ability to evangelize and provide sacraments to the Christians. So in some ways, perhaps by wearing the everyday clothing of people around them, it allowed priests to do ministry in a more clandestine way to their brother and sister Christians. After the legalization of Christianity, there started to crop up some conversation around this. Should priests wear something distinctive that makes them stand out? Pope Celestine I chimed in on the conversation, and he pointed out that he thinks that priests should be known by their virtue, not by their garb. I think that's a really good point. So whether or not any of us are wearing a Roman collar, we priests should be known by our virtue more than by our garb. Over time, the conversation around distinctive clothing for clergy swung the other direction. We really did move in the direction of clergy wearing something that makes them stand out. This especially became the case beginning in the Middle Ages. And we don't know a whole lot about the history of how did we go from what it originally was to what it is today, this Roman collar here. But some of the theories around that is that the priests would start to wear the clothing of the people, maybe in the northern Germanic areas, and it would probably be a long tunic or a long black jacket. And with that jacket, you might wear a scarf because there's maybe a stiff collar. So a scarf, a white scarf would be worn underneath. So you'd have white up here and then black the rest of the way down. And so eventually that probably evolved into what we would consider today to be the Roman cassock, that long black garb with that little white collar at the top. And about 100 years ago, right around the time of the World Wars, we started to see this detachable Roman collar kind of come into vogue. And you'll see today it's kind of this little white plastic piece that kind of sticks in there. So this started to become more of the trend in the early 1900s. It especially became handy in time for priests to go help with the troops who were called off to war, to be with them on the battle lines, to be with them back at camp. It was just a bit more conducive to that kind of a lifestyle. And since the World Wars, this style has really become the norm, this little white tab. There's also other styles that priests still wear today, but this is just kind of the general trend of things since the wars. But why? Why do priests wear this? You know, some might accuse priests of wearing this because they think that they want the attention, or they like to have some feeling of authority when they're around other people. And I suppose there's going to be the occasional priest who's definitely doing it for that reason, which is unfortunate. But that's never been the driving philosophy behind why a priest is wearing distinctive garb. I would say it comes down to a couple things. First of all, it comes down to the priest being poor. There's a spiritual poverty in the fact that a priest doesn't get to choose what he wears. He embraces a particular uniform and he wears it every day. If you were to go in my closet, it is a whole bunch of these shirts and a whole bunch of pairs of black pants, and there's not really much else in the closet. There's a certain poverty that's required of me. And also on maybe a material poverty, there is in that as well, because I don't have to think about wearing a particular style or fitting in with the newest brands. But I think that it's also a sign of solidarity with the poor. The fact that I wear the same thing every day. It's a plain black color. It's not terribly interesting to look at. And I especially love how Johnny Cash puts it in his song, Man in Black. He wrote this song to explain why he's always wearing black. And so he explains in that song that he wears the black for the poor, for the beaten down, for the lonely, for the sick, for the prisoner. He's got a great line in there that I really love. It says this: "But just so we're reminded of the ones who are held back, up front there ought to be a man in black." So he's pointing out that he wears black in some ways to show solidarity and to be a prophet for the world who forgets sometimes that there are people who are suffering. There are people who are poor. In some ways, that's what the priest is doing as well when we wear black. It's a sign of solidarity with those who suffer and those who are poor. Another reason why priests wear the Roman collar is to be a visible sign to the world that we belong to something greater. It's a sign of what we believe, and it's a sign of who we belong to. I think we live in a culture that already does that a lot, right? People will wear a wedding ring, for example. It's a sign that they belong to somebody and they're committed to somebody. Sometimes people will have a tattoo, and I love to ask people what their tattoo means. There's something symbolic in a person's tattoo that tells you something about who they are, what they believe, what matters to them. It might even be just as simple as a sticker on a water bottle. We use these different symbols, we do these things with our bodies and with our clothing to show what matters to us, what's important to us, who do we belong to. When the priest wears the Roman collar, it's kind of saying the same thing. It says, I belong to Jesus Christ. I belong to the Catholic Church, and I am available to you, whoever you are, for your spiritual needs. It's one of the fun things of being a priest. I love those encounters that I get to have with strangers. That happens all the time. People will stop me while on a walk just to ask me if I'm a priest, and then maybe have a little conversation about what's going on in their life. Or maybe someone wants prayers, so they'll ask for my prayers, or they'll ask me to bless an object. There have been times where I've been sitting in an airport, minding my own business, reading a book, when someone comes up to me and asks if I could hear their confession. It's really neat how being this visible sign with this Roman collar is actually inviting people into an encounter. By being that visible sign of what I belong to, it invites the dialogue. It even invites dialogue sometimes with people who don't agree, people who are angry. I've had encounters with people who are angry with the Catholic Church, or who want to kind of begin a little bit of a fight or to voice their complaint. And that's fine. Really, the priest exists for that as well. I want to be a representative of the priests of the church. I want to be a representative of Jesus. If someone wants to come to me and voice their anger against the church or against their experience with Christians, then I want to receive that on behalf of Jesus with all the love and the patience and the kindness that I can muster, because people need to know that they are heard, that they are received, and they are loved by God. So the Roman collar stands out really for two reasons, I think. First of all, it stands out because it's a witness to what the priest believes, what really matters to him. And it stands out as an invitation to something beyond this world. It's a reminder that life doesn't end here, that there's something else that's worth living for. And I think that's something we can take away from the fact that the priest wears a Roman collar. All of us who are Christian are called to the same two things. Maybe we're not wearing distinctive garb like a Roman collar, or maybe we're not wearing some Christian jewelry or something like that, but we're still called to the same two things: to be a public witness to what we believe. Do the people in our life know that we're a Christian? Do they know that what we believe? Do they know that we love Jesus and that we want people to know the truth? Do they know that about us? Are we a public witness? And we're all supposed to be kind of that living invitation to an encounter with something beyond this world. Do we live in such a way that we show that our faith and our hope and our love is in God? That we're not so connected and so concerned about this life in this world? Do we live in a way that it sparks that desire and that question in people of the bigger questions in life? It's uncomfortable to stand out with our faith. There's going to be people who don't understand, who don't like us, who dismiss us, who criticize us, and that's an uncomfortable thing, sure. But if we really live our faith boldly, then people are going to see our virtue, they're going to see our hope, they're going to see our joy, they're going to see our love, and there's going to be some people who are just drawn to it and curious about what makes us tick, what makes us so different. That becomes the entry point. That becomes the doorway to encountering Jesus. And as Christians, that's what we want to be. We want to be the doorway to an encounter with Jesus. And that's why priests wear the Roman collar. And that's why we are all called to stand out with our faith. God bless you.